Hello, welcome to the MuseScore Café for today, May 22nd, 2019. And today, my name is always, my name is Marc Sabatella. I'm the Director of Education for MuseScore. I'm also one of the developers of MuseScore, and I do this weekly series of chats to just sort of connect and talk about things that might be of interest to people, that are of interest to me. And the topic I plan to talk about today is continuous view, but I have to be honest, we are in the middle of getting ready to release MuseScore 3.1 and put out a release candidate, and I think I just fixed maybe the last bug we need to fix for this release. So I actually am going to test this for you. Without showing what was wrong before, I just want to see how this is working. If I come in here and enter some notes, I want to just make sure that all these systems here don't start shifting around on me as I enter notes. They don't. That is very, very good. So that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and submit my pull request and then let it start building while I then talk about what I actually was going to talk about. So this is my pull request for the bug. I'll talk about it because it's actually related to what's going on with continuous view. So VR fix problem. Okay, so create pull request. Pull request created. Excellent. Okay, so all right, so what continuous view? So the normal thing in MuseScore is page view, and this is what you see here. It looks like a page. If I zoom out, you can see it looks like a page. It's got margins and so forth. It's got all this systems laid out, left to right, and then go on to the next line, left to right. I really don't care about this. Oh, I care about you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I didn't care about the notification. I like to turn my notifications off while I'm doing these. So this is all well and good, but if you're entering notes then, let's say you're kind of zoomed in and you're entering some notes, and you reach the end of one line, and it jumps to the next line, you can't see the note you just entered. So if you really wanted to go back and, add another note to that chord, I know the shortcut, Shift E, will add a note, but I don't even get to see that happen. I'd have to actually cursor back to see it happen. And of course, if I want to use the mouse to enter notes, I definitely needed to cursor back, and then it jumps forward again. So this isn't a bug. This is the way it's supposed to work, because normally you enter notes left to right. It's like word wrap. You go on to the next line when you're done with one line, and it's expected you're probably going to want to enter notes into the next measure. But that's not always the case. So for one thing, we also have this button here, the pan score automatically button, that you can turn off. And if you turn that off, now if I add another note to this chord, you'll see it doesn't jump. Similarly, if I start entering notes into another measure, even though I'm entering with the next measure, the score has not moved. With the pan score automatically option turned off, the score doesn't move. So there's that. That's something that's a relatively new feature. Continuous view, though, takes a totally different approach here. So if you go to this drop down here and pick continuous view, what you see is one long strip. You can see where your line breaks were, it's just all now in one long strip. So you never really have to worry about that. It'll, as you enter notes, the score scrolls, but you can always see the measure you just entered because it's just to the left. It's not like all the way on the previous line. It's just to the left of you. So that's all well and good. And we implemented that a long time ago. But there's some interesting improvements here. So in order to talk about that, I need to talk about some of the overall improvements in MuseScore 3, and then talk about what's going on specifically with continuous view. So one of the things about MuseScore 2, do I have that still up and running? I believe I do. There it is. Okay, MuseScore 2. This is another bug I fixed, and I wanted to make sure it was a bug in MuseScore 2, and it was. All right, so in MuseScore 2, if you had a very large file, and I'm going to load a very large file, if you had a large file loaded, it tended to be slow to work with. And this isn't even that large of a file, it's just large enough to show the slowness. So like I'm going to raise this note an octave. So you'll see me hit the shortcut and then kind of watch while it takes a moment to update. Well, that wasn't actually slow at all, right? That was pretty snappy. I've got scores that are much slower than that I could in fact, let me see if I can get one going here just because. If I go to this guy here, I think that one's pretty slow. And if not, there's the rite of spring. Yeah, that was pretty slow, right? Okay, and the reason it's slow is because we are having to basically lay out the entire score. We're recalculating the position of every single element. This is MuseScore 2 we're talking about. Every single element, every single note, every single lyric, every single marking of any kind in the score, we are recalculating everything about it every time you make any change in MuseScore 2. So that operation is kind of painfully slow just to do anything. And it's not really different in page versus continuous view in MuseScore 2. Right? So I hit a button. Yeah, it hasn't even updated this. Oh, there it goes, finally. I press a button. And it just takes a second. So MuseScore 2, that's the case. Now MuseScore 3, we implemented, Werner really implemented a very a much more sophisticated system where we figure out what needs to be updated. I mean, yeah, you updated that one note, and that might affect the layout of that one measure. It might make that measure wider or narrower, and that might change the other measures on that system. But if only that system, if it doesn't cause a measure to actually wrap around to the next system, then we should be done. We shouldn't need to change anything else about the layout of your score just because you changed that one note. We should just have to change that one system. So in MuseScore 3, even though there's a lot more going on with layout because of automatic placement, it's actually quite a bit faster. So let me load that same score. It's quite a bit faster. Where am I? Okay, sorry. You'll see that in page view, I will reset position, sure. It'll be quite a bit faster. This is the current version, 3.0.5. You'll see there's extra space here because we've changed how lyric sum processing worked in a way that needs this setting to be updated, and I think 3.1 is going to do that more automatically. So if we zoom out on this score, you'll see that this system is only 3 measures here, and then it moves on to the next page, and changing that one note isn't going to affect anything but that one page. And so hopefully that's it. MuseScore 2 reasserted itself because every time an autosave kicks in every 2 minutes, the window pops up. That's annoying. So I'm going to now click that note, and now let's see if we can see if it's faster when I do Control up to raise it an octave. Yeah, it's faster. It's not totally instant because there's some things that do have to be calculated for the entire score. Things that need to be aligned in a particular way. Well, like basically most of the slurs and hairpins, crescendos and so forth need to be relayed out. So that manages to be pretty fast. It's faster than MuseScore 2 was. That's all well and good for page view because we do it by looking at one system at a time, and we only update that system plus whatever needs to be updated on other systems, which isn't much. However, if I switch to continuous view, unfortunately it's a different story. Continuous view is really one long system. So this approach of saying we're just going to update what changed fails big time. And now when I go to raise this an octave, well, that one still wasn't all that slow. It's slower. At this point, I would prefer to look at the Haydn example, actually, because it showed that problem a little more. That if I put Haydn into continuous, if I put it in page view, I mean, that sucker is fast, right, in page view. However, in continuous view, it takes a minute just to get to continuous view because it's got to relay out the entire score. And maybe I also didn't totally click it. Here we go. All right, now let's see. Oh, and it kind of even hung on that. All right, let me do that again. I'm going to go back down an octave. Right? You got to wait for everything in continuous view because continuous view is one long system. It's having to relay out the entire score. So the change that we made, well, change that we made for page view, that was mostly Werner's work, doesn't help us in continuous view. And yet, the data structures are still there. We still know which measures need to be changed, need to be updated. And realistically, not the entire score should need to be relayed out. Let me get out of here for a second and load the version where I can show this off. So we know which measures actually changed, or maybe got wider, maybe got narrower. The rest of the measures, sure, they might shift over because one measure got wider, but nothing else changes. Only thing that happened is that if one measure got wider, everything else got shifted over. We shouldn't need to recalculate every last thing about the layout of it. So I went in and made that happen. So in 3.1, when it releases, it's going to be the case that we're going to have the same sort of speed improvements for continuous view that we've been enjoying for page view. So let me show that off. If I go to that same score, scores, I remember where I'm at. Sorry that these are all different versions that I can't have all loaded at once because you just can't have them all loaded at once. So, I didn't want that one. I wanted the Haydn. Dang it. Oh well, I will want that one in a minute, so that's fine. Oh, by the way, you can see how the extra space there is gone, right? Remember how there was all that extra space there in MuseScore 3.0, in MuseScore 3.1, that's gone. We've corrected the space below lyrics on import of old scores. That was only an issue for import of old scores. All right, so let me get back to the Haydn. That was in here, and I say Haydn. So in my version here, page view hasn't changed. It's still snappy as heck. But if I now go to continuous view, you ready? It's snappy as heck too. So that's because it's basically the same optimization being performed. We're only relaying out what needs to. If I make this a C sharp, okay, that means everything, this measure is going to get a little wider, right? That measure got wider because of the need for the sharp and the natural, but it's still really quick. These other measures, sure, they moved over, but all I have to do is recalculate the start position of those things and some of the internal things within them just by adding the difference. This measure got wider by this much, and so I just push everything over by that much. I don't have to totally recalculate everything. So continuous, it used to be the case with MuseScore 2 that people would complain working on large scores was really difficult because of how slow it was. So that was one of the very first things that Werner improved working on MuseScore 3 several years ago, but it was only improved for page view. So page view, MuseScore 3 is much faster than MuseScore 2. However, continuous view not only wasn't faster, but it actually got slower, primarily because, well, automatic placement slows things down, and so now you got to see continuous view being slow, plus the extra work of automatic placement, plus some additional slowdown due to some changes in how we did some things to make improvements in things like cross-staff beaming or beaming across bar lines, actually. And so to fix some bugs, we had to change the order in which things happened in and perform a couple operations multiple times, do it first as a guess and then do it again later. Anyhow, that kind of thing caused layout to get slower. You didn't see it in page view because we were only doing what needed to, but in continuous view, having to relay out the entire score on every change meant continuous view was actually a lot slower in MuseScore 3 than in MuseScore 2. In MuseScore 3.1, that will no longer be the case. So why are the dynamics running? Oh yeah, okay, this is a good question. And they're running into each other here also. These are scores that I imported from MuseScore 2. So let me close this one again. And because when let's see, when I imported it, which one was that? That was Bohemian, right? Let's go back. Hi, Colleen, by the way. Boy, I'm not remembering where the heck I'm at, what I'm doing here, because I've been juggling so many things lately. We're getting ready for this this 3.1 release, and I've been in furious fixing last minute bugs and things mode. All right, so reset the positions of all elements. Basically, MuseScore is looking at the manual adjustments that were applied in MuseScore 2 and saying, you know what, because of automatic placement, those adjustments probably don't make sense anymore. There must have been some manual adjustments that were made, to move this dynamic over, because the default position of that dynamic would have been right on top of the lyric in MuseScore 2, because MuseScore 2 did not have automatic placement. So in MuseScore 3, we now have this automatic placement. So those manual adjustments you made probably aren't necessary anymore. And furthermore, even if they were necessary, chances are the same adjustment isn't going to be appropriate. You would need a somewhat different adjustment because the things are different. So I went ahead and said reset positions of all elements. And when I do that, it now puts everything, well, actually, I didn't say reset is what happened. I did not say reset. I tried to just tell it to use the existing manual adjustments, which just frankly weren't right anymore. If you've made a lot of manual adjustments to work around the lack of autoplace in MuseScore 2, you're going to have to maybe redo a little of that in MuseScore 3. Now, in this case, I said reset everything. So now MuseScore is putting everything into the new default positions. Remember, the old default positions in MuseScore 2 had collisions, right? If I do Control R here, you see all these places where the lyrics are colliding with the dynamics. In MuseScore 3, the dynamics don't do that, but unfortunately, what they do is they push the lyrics down. So realistically, I don't want to just push that dynamic to the left. Really, what I should do is take all the dynamics on this staff, select all dynamics, all similar elements on same staff, and flip them above the staff. That's how you do lyrics in, that's how you're supposed to do dynamics when you're doing music with lyrics. So if I press X, boom, now the dynamics are above the staff. That is what should have happened. And then I should do that for each of the lyric staffs. Or I could do it for all the staves, but then it's going to also do the same for all the instrumental staves, and then it's not right. So I would really just do it for this. So that's the sort of thing where when you're importing an older score into MuseScore 3, you're probably going to need to redo some of these manual adjustments, but hopefully you can redo them better. So instead of just manually dragging everything to the left, which is what the person who produced this score had done, you really want to flip them all above the staff, which used to not really be possible. There was no single way to just put everything above the staff like that, but now there is. Select everything, press X. So that's that. So the other, so that's the reason we were seeing weird collisions was because it was I apparently, and I was working so fast and that I wasn't paying attention. When it asked me if I wanted to reset the positions, I guess I must have said no. And if I say no, it's going to say, okay, I'm going to try to keep your manual adjustments. And it is trying to keep them. And you'll notice, okay, so the P is still to the left of the is. Originally, let me undo all my changes over here. Oh, well, doesn't matter what view I'm in. Of course, this is MuseScore 2, so it's going to be slow now to undo all those changes. It had moved the dynamic over by a distance that was just enough to create a little space there. That same manual adjustment, because the defaults are a little different, that same adjustment no longer is quite enough. Right, so that's what's going on. But this also, so yeah, if you try to keep your manual adjustments, it'll keep them, but they might be a little off just because the defaults have changed. It looks like someone also tried to move the lyrics a little higher. Yeah, they must have manually adjusted some of these lyrics here. Yeah, I can see a little of that going on. Not sure exactly, but things basically, if you create a score with MuseScore 2, you're really better off just taking the reset, in most cases, taking the reset, let it put everything in default, and then perform new manual adjustments because you'll get better results. But the other thing that is worth pointing out is if I switch to continuous view now, notice the lyrics aren't just running into the dynamics, they're running into the next staff. Well, in continuous view, so this is the thing I mentioned, you have an opportunity to give some feedback here. In continuous view, in page view, let me go back to page view for a second. In page view, come on. My system is locked because I'm not even, oh, there we go. Okay. In page view, we add extra space between staves as necessary. I am kind of annoyed by those let me just do the reset. That'll make me happier. All right. Notice how it added extra space as necessary. That's what automatic placement does, one of the things it does. So in page view, it adds extra space, but it only needs to do it where needed. So, because if there's other measures later on in the score where that's not happening, because maybe there's no lyrics, like here, we don't need that extra space because there's no lyrics there. So page view is able to add space to only the systems that need it. But of course, continuous view is one big system. So, whatever measure has the most lyrics to it, that determines the amount of space we would need. So we would have to add a lot of space to this entire score just because one measure happened to have 7 verses of lyrics under it, or a whole one line way below the, one note way below the staff. So there was sort of a conscious choice made not to automatically add extra space. But what it does mean is your lyrics now can collide with the next staff. Well, that's obviously not good. So, the way that we currently have to work around that, if you want to work in continuous view with lyrics, because this is mostly lyrics that this is going to happen, is to add a spacer. If I add a spacer to this staff, I can then double click it, drag down, and open up some extra space. And now I can work in continuous view. When I go back to page view, I'm probably going to want to remove that spacer. So that's not ideal. I've been toying with a thing where maybe if we add a spacer in continuous view, it would only add it in continuous view. So you would be able to add it in continuous view and have just enough space to get your work done. And if there's one measure later on that's got 7 verses, so this isn't enough space, well, then you could just add another spacer there and add, change the amount of space just there. So anyhow, I'm still toying with this. This is any, I could use feedback on this. So anyone who's watching this, feel free to leave a comment on the video. There's a discussion on the, let me get that actually, because that seems relevant. If I go to the issue tracker, and maybe you want to see how to do that anyhow. So I go to MuseScore.org and then issue tracker under support. And I'm going to search for lyrics continuous, because I think that's continuous view need space for lyrics. So this is the discussion that's ongoing about that. So let me come back and find my I'll post that into the comments when I find them. Because I don't think I have that open in this right now. Oh, there it is. I wonder, because I just changed from that tab. Comments. Continuous view needing space for lyrics. Here, please leave suggestions here or in that issue. All right, so yeah, we're looking for ideas, because I mean, maybe people just don't mind that if there's 20 verses just on one system, that it's going to add space everywhere. I mean, realistically, I think MuseScore 2 did that. I think also it was performance reasons, because we recognized continuous view was going to be slow with autoplays, but now that continuous view is faster, that's much less of a concern. So if I add a bunch more lyrics here, I'm just going to add hello. Yes, well, in MuseScore 2, it's slow. That's the deal. So yeah, if I add a bunch of lyrics here, it's going to open up a lot of space once it's finally done. And the question is it going to do it through the whole score? And I think it's going to have no choice to, because I don't think MuseScore 2 had any special smarts. Okay, so yeah, see how much space it added there, and it's needed for this measure. But yeah, it adds it throughout the whole score. This is kind of what we wanted to avoid, but maybe that's okay. Maybe people don't mind that that's going to look like that if there's one measure that needed it. I don't know. I kind of like the idea of having this adjustment, and I talk in that thread about some other things. All right, so I mentioned also that this sort of related to the bug fix you saw me working on before. That bug was due to another thing that I had fixed earlier, like a couple months ago, that turns out to have had a bad side effect, specifically because of this issue of we're only laying out what needs to be laid out. Sometimes when we do that, there's something that we didn't realize needed to be updated, and until later on when something happens and we realize, oh shoot, I changed this note here, and it really, like when I showed you that example here where I made the measure a little wider by adding a note, by changing a note, and everything else had to kind of move over. Or let's say I start adding some 16th notes here. If I add 16th notes, more and more 16th notes, right, everything kind of needs to move over, especially if I put more accidentals on these things. Everything else kind of moves over, and yeah, I'm getting that right. Well, there's places where that wasn't happening right, not in continuous view, but in page view, where after making a change, something that we didn't realize the amount of space between systems needed to be updated, and it wasn't being. So I think that's the bug I just fixed this morning, but I need to kind of get back to testing on that and making sure everything's okay. So, because yeah, as I said, today the plan is we put out this release candidate, it's called, for MuseScore 3.1, meaning we think we fixed all the bugs. There were a whole lot of bug fixes that just went in. I mean, that were, the work was done over the last couple months, but then it was finally actually merged into the actual source code for MuseScore just in the last few days. So, we tested what we could, found some more problems, and have fixed them. And today, the plan is we put out this release candidate, meaning that as of at some point later today, there will be something that we're putting out saying, we think this is what MuseScore 3.1 is going to be. It's not a beta version. We think this is the actual thing, unless there's like a really serious showstopper problem, something serious that got worse since MuseScore 3.0.5, the current version. This is going to be 3.1. So we really want people to download that 3.1 release candidate when it becomes available. And that really should be quite soon, just later today. So anyhow, I'm going to go back and do some more testing on that fix that I made and see if I've missed out on any other last-minute crises that need my attention. So with that, I'll leave you, and hopefully, I think next week I'll be able to, at this time, we probably will be releasing MuseScore 3.1 next Wednesday, I think. I think that's kind of the plan. There was a schedule posted, a tentative schedule posted on the forums, but, things are always subject to change. So, yeah, it'll either be next week or next Wednesday or shortly after. So either I'll be talking about the release of 3.1 and recapping what's new in that, or I'll find some other random thing to talk about. So, hope everyone has a good week. And there's no further questions. I will see you soon.